In an Edmunds exclusive test, we're pitting the new Jeep Gladiator Rubicon against the Chevrolet Colorado ZR2 on the road, on the trails, over obstacles, and in the dunes. We're here in Ocotillo Wells, California, which is a beautiful wide open desert landscape that has trails that run everywhere. I really like coming here, and I've seen a lot of it, but I've never seen this place. But what I do know about coming here is that you need a truck that can handle just about anything.
That's right. That's why we brought out the Chevrolet Colorado ZR2. It's a truck that we're intimately familiar with. We've had it on numerous comparison tests. We've driven it all over the place. We even have one in our long-term fleet.
Exactly. And while we know what the Colorado can and can't do, we don't know anything about the new Jeep Gladiator. I mean, they've been teasing us for years at places like Moab with concept vehicles, but now we finally got one. And we can find out once and for all if this is a Jeepy truck or a trucky Jeep.
That's right, and we can't wait to test the metal.
Oh, I see what you did there.
And find out the good, bad, and the ugly of these two platforms by getting them out there.
Exactly. Let's hit the trail. But before we hit the trail, you hit subscribe. And also remember to use Edmunds for all your truck shopping needs. Right now we're on one of the main thoroughfares here in Ocotillo Wells. We can get some speed up. This section is covered with whoop-de-doos, which you get where there's motorcycle and side-by-side traffic. They really chop up the surface here, and the suspension on the Gladiator seems to be dealing with it really well. The Fox shocks are nicely tuned, and the wheelbase seems to be helping settle out the motions.
If you don't have the right suspension, it can ruin your day. Thankfully, the Colorado ZR2 has these trick dampers from a company called Multimatic that kind of is speed sensitive, if you will, and keeps the truck pretty stable, even on these washboards. Now, an interesting fact is that sometimes going slow is bad, and for the Colorado, it really likes a little bit of speed, so it's just skimming the tops of these washboard bumps.
Wrangler is what this is based on. You know, the Wrangler is known for being a vehicle that can pretty much do anything and go anywhere. And they've had a two-door version, and then they introduced the four-door version, of course. There doesn't seem to be any limit to the appetite for variants of this vehicle. So now we have a Jeep pickup, and they call it the Gladiator. The thing about a Jeep is it can go anywhere. On trails you might not even feel comfortable walking up. You can crawl up in a Jeep. The other thing is, you know, the top comes off, the doors come off, the windshield folds. I mean, nothing puts you in the middle of the action like a Jeep. And now the Jeep truck just gives the person who kind of needs a truck but wants a Jeep a way to have both at the same time.
Chevrolet's been making trucks for quite possibly 1 billion years, but the Colorado is actually fairly new. This second generation was only introduced about 4 or 5 years ago. But the ZR2 is a little bit different. Chevrolet saw people buying other trucks that were more enthusiast oriented, not so much for the 9 to 5, hence the ZR2. It's a little bit wider, it's got better suspension, and it's more meant for the weekend than the weekday.
Customization is almost expected. There's so many different aftermarket parts that Mopar sells and independent company sells. If you can dream it, they make it for a Jeep. I mean, the first thing people do is they usually lift it up, they add bigger tires. And the thing about the Gladiator is the Rubicon comes with 33-inch tires, but they say 35s will fit without any modification. Even the spare tire compartment in the back underneath the frame will hold a 35-inch tire without any modification. So right there, they've even designed in the knowledge that people are going to want to mod this thing.
Enthusiasts like tinkering with their stuff, you know, upgrading. They've provided a catalog of parts, for example, the new Bison model with upgraded armor and underbody protection, and even performance parts from the GM Performance Parts catalog. And you can upgrade suspension, upgrade the power, so you can go a little bit faster than you're going now.
Yeah, these whoop-de-doos are really deep. I generally just have to tolerate them until I get where I'm going. But certainly This is easier in Gladiator than it is in, say, my two-door Jeep Wrangler, which really gets tossed around because it's so short.
I just turned off the stability control system because as we're skimming the tops of these bumps, the computer's kind of flipping out a little bit and kind of directing me, giving me inputs that I don't really want. So by turning it off, it's giving me a little bit more control over how we're going down the road.
Calvin in the Colorado is probably saying that the ride's pretty good, but the Multimatic dampers don't seem to be as well suited to the terrain as you'd think they might be. My impression is they're tuned really well for the pavement, and they could stand to have another tuning session out here on this type of terrain.
The Colorado's independent front suspension pays dividends on these flatter washboard roads. It's not that great on rock crawling because of the lack of articulation, but out here, the dampers can really control each wheel individually, and on top of that, the rack and pinion steering gives me fingertip control and pointability. The Gladiator's front suspension, on the other hand, has to do a lot more work, simply because the solid front axle is a lot heavier. On top of that, the Gladiator's recirculating ball steering system just isn't as precise as the ZR2's rack and pinion. Let's take it some more work and really flex its muscles. We're here at the off-road training area in Ocotillo Wells, and there's a lot of obstacles designed to test the agility and capability of both modified trucks and side-by-sides.
Right, and modified is the key word here, because have you seen some of this stuff? I mean, it's really difficult. I can't imagine an unmodified vehicle even attempting some of it. That's why we're here at a fairly simple obstacle that's meant to test approach, departure, ground clearance, and breakover angle.
Hey, these are all things that we don't know about on the Gladiator.
Exactly, so I think we're going to know a little bit more in a few minutes. I'm lined up with the Tubular Obstacle. The Gladiator has a longer wheelbase not only than a Wrangler Unlimited, but also a mid-size pickup with a 5-foot bed and a crew cab, which is what this is. So let's see how it does.
Do I look like I'm lined up okay?
Looks good from here.
I can actually see pretty well over the hood of this vehicle. The fenders drop away, and it's pretty easy to see. It's got a good crawl ratio, so I don't have to go very fast.
Looks pretty good. No problems with approach, and now the first breakover. Whoa. Oh, just barely. Oh, yeah. Oh, he's on there.
That felt important. It's still touching.
Wow, yeah.
Is that anything important sounding underneath there?
Oh, no, just your frame rail and...
Maybe drive shaft?
Drive shaft?
No, I'm just kidding. It's just a skid plate.
I'm riding the brakes a little bit to control my speed because I don't want to go over one of these things too quickly.
I mean, the good thing is the approach angle is nothing to worry about. Oh, just a little drag on the hitch. Oh, but it's that breakover. Wow.
Another drag.
Yeah, you're just laying on that skid plate, but thank goodness it's there.
Oh, it's just a skid plate. I feel much better.
One of the benefits of a skid plate is it helps you slide right off obstacles like that. And so far, departure angle doesn't seem to be an issue, so it's just the breakover height.
Almost done.
So close. Oh, no, looks good. Good job, Gladiator.
I rub-a-dub-dubbed a little bit more than I thought I might there.
We're about to do tubular, so I'm gonna go ahead and put it in 4 low.
If you keep it slow, you probably won't kill it.
Dan, I don't have a lot of visibility out the front. You think you
You can tell me and let me know if I'm okay laterally.
Yeah, you're pretty well centered. You might cheat it just to the right a little tiny bit, but not much.
The approach angle is really good. The first breakover angle test was good. And let's see the first departure angle test out from the back. Now, Dan, was that a little bit of a rub on the exhaust?
No harm, no foul.
Well, all right.
That was pretty
Good. A couple of light taps, but nothing major. We just left the training area and we drove on an obstacle that we picked because it highlighted the approach, departure, and breakover angle of these two vehicles. This truck has a very long wheelbase. I was worried about it. Departure angle a little bit as well because the rear end does hang out there a little bit, but it performed much better than I thought, especially departure. The spare is tucked up nice and tight, and it's got little rub rails to protect the bed corners, which we didn't need because it didn't rub. And the skid plate that they have is right where it needs to be, and that's the only thing that touched. And it didn't touch that bad. I crawled underneath there, not even that many detectable scratches. So did pretty well. I'm less worried about that aspect of this vehicle than I was going into this test.
We were surprised at the ground clearance that the ZR2 had. I honestly thought it'd drag body parts a little bit more than it did, but all things considered, the built-in skid plate did its job, and that's what it's there for. The exhaust tip did touch down, as well as the spare tire, and while we'd like to see both of those items higher up in the body, not too bad.
Before we came here, I put both of these trucks on a RTI ramp, that's Ramp Travel Index. It measures the articulation of the suspension, the amount it can flex. And the Gladiator really did a great job. It has an advantage though, because the stabilizer bar can be disconnected, but even when it was connected, it matched the ZR2. When it was disconnected, it added a significant advantage, and that didn't really come into play on the obstacle we just drove, but it came into play on the way to that obstacle.
Out here on the road, the ZR2's independent front suspension is not magical, but compared to the Gladiators, it is. See, the Gladiator's heavy, solid front axle has a lot of joints and stuff to make it turn and articulate, whereas ZR2's does not. What that means is, yeah, I lose a little bit of flex on the rocks, but I get absolutely straight, precise tracking on the road. Now, normally, big knobby tires don't ride so well, but surprisingly, the ones on the ZR2 are pretty good, and combined with the Multimatic dampers that I mentioned earlier, it's actually a pretty good ride. In fact, it's better than some trucks that are specifically just meant for the street.
The highway ride of the Gladiator is a little bit better than the Wrangler because of the longer wheelbase, but it's not quite as settled and poised as the ZR2 and other trucks that have independent front suspension. It's pretty smooth over the wavy stuff, but when you hit individual single wheel bumps, the front axle can shudder just a little bit. The other thing you notice when on the highway is this is a boxy vehicle and there's a fair bit of wind noise because of it. The other thing that's kind of interesting though is the Gladiator has adaptive cruise control. Right up here by the mirror, they've actually built a sensor to enable that. And what's neat about that location is you can put on a winch or another bumper and it'll still work. And you can even fold the windshield down and it'll still work.
ZR2 is powered by a V6 engine that makes a little over 300 horsepower, and it's mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission. We like this setup because it's very responsive and does what you want. When you want it to go a little bit faster, the downshifts are crisp and quick, and when you're done, it upshifts back to save gas. In fact, it even has a cylinder deactivation mode. Not much to dislike here.
Both of these trucks have the same displacement engine. They're both 3.6 liter V6s. And they both have the same transmission in terms of gears. The ZR2 makes a little bit more horsepower and torque. It's not a significant amount, but the Jeep makes up for it off-road because in low range, the transfer case has a 4-to-1 ratio. So if you're crawling in low, this is going to feel a lot more torquey, and it's going to be easier to control speed like we saw on the tube obstacle. The Gladiator has the highest tow rating in the segment. Now there is an asterisk there. That applies to the Sport, which is the entry-level model. If you get a Rubicon like this one, the maximum tow rating is 7,000 pounds. That's still pretty darn good.
The same trick suspension that gives the ZR2 its immense capability both on and off the road is also its Achilles heel for both payload capacity and towing capacity. For payload, it's 1,100 pounds, and for towing, it's only 5,000 pounds. That doesn't even hold a candle to the Z71 model, and certainly not to the Gladiator. While realistically speaking, it's more than enough for most people, if you're looking for the ultimate in towing and payload, ZR2 isn't it.
One thing that Jeep wanted to make sure of was that the Gladiator had a bed that was useful. So it has a 5-foot bed, just like the crew cab versions of its competition. It's got 4 tie downs that come with it. Front 2 are D-rings that pivot. There are a system of 3 rails and sliding tie downs that is a factory option, not an accessory. You can get a 110 volt outlet in the bed. It's not terribly deep, which I think in my mind a positive, because let's face it, the Colorado ZR2's bedsides are comically high. You know, what is it going to be, a jacuzzi? You're not going to fill it up to the brim with anything anyway.
I hope you've been doing your CrossFit because you're going to need it to get into the bed. The cargo bed in a Colorado pickup truck has a high load floor and high bed sides. Great for loose stuff, but not so good for anything else. ZR2 makes it even worse because it has 2 more additional inches of ground clearance, which means the load floor and the bed sides are that much higher.
So 2 things that I like about this tailgate is, 1, it's tied into the central locking. So if you lock the truck, you lock the tailgate. The other thing that's really cool is it's got a 45-degree open position. By just taking the cables that hold it open and looping them around a stay that they have there. What's neat about that is the 45-degree tailgate, the edge of it is lined up with the fender top, so you can stack plywood flat. It's kind of a neat setup, and it's real simple. This weekend something happened. I have 4 orange trees in my backyard, and we had to pick the oranges and take them to a donation center. And that ended up being about 700 pounds in the back of the bed. And one thing you notice about this truck is the rear axle kind of crowds the cab a little bit more than some of its competition. The effect of that is the center of gravity of your payload is going to be a little bit further behind the rear axle, which will unweight the front a little bit more and make the ride a little bit less flat. And I certainly did observe that. It wasn't bad, but certainly is something to be aware of. The thing about the Gladiator that's really nice is it is, for all intents and purposes, a Wrangler pickup truck. Doors come off, windshield folds. It just happens to have a 5-foot bed back there. If you want a Jeep and you don't really need a truck, well, you might as well get a Wrangler. But if you're the kind of person that, yeah, you want a truck, but you want to be able to take it off-road, it's going to be hard to recommend against this one.
We've done tight trails and the street, so now we're going to do something completely different. We're going to go out to the dunes where we can open these trucks up and see what they can do when it's soft, but hopefully fast. So we made it to the dunes.
Absolutely. Look at them, they go for miles.
It's pretty gnarly out here.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's right, and you know what? That's what these trucks are all about, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have to do this, but we want to.
Let's get out there then.
All right. It's fun, but I don't want to get stuck.
This is awesome. Super fun way to test out the all-wheel drive system. Multimatic dampers don't mind this sort of abuse. In fact, they like this.
So this is Tectonic Wash, which is a really cool formation. It looks like they could have filmed Star Wars here. And the Gladiator is longer than a Wrangler or compact pickups that are similar. And so I'm just watching the rear corner when I go around some of these tighter corners. But it's not that bad because a Jeep is narrower than a regular compact pickup, or midsize I should say. This also has protection on the lower corner of the bed, so I don't really feel like I'm going to tear anything up if I rub the side of the bank as I go around one of these tight corners. And even if it gets really bad and I rip off a fender, well, it's not like a trip to the body shop necessarily. You know, the black plastic fender that sticks out this far is something you can buy and bolt on another one. or not. You see people with Jeeps where they have removed the fenders to give them that much more clearance. I guess you could do that if you wanted to. The interior here is utterly familiar. It's just like the Wranglers, which is good because the new Wrangler that they just introduced last year has some great improvements, and they're all here as far as the organization of all the controls, the seats, the dashboard, just the way it all looks and operates. It has a real nice quality feel to it. All these controls are really fantastic.
The Colorado is fundamentally a work truck, and the ZR2 shares a lot of the benefits that brings, such as a very usable interior with buttons that are large and easy to access. All the switchgear falls right in hand.
Got Apple CarPlay, Android Auto built into the 8.4-inch Uconnect system. It's a touchscreen, but there's also some fixed buttons that are really prominent, some virtual buttons that are always in the same place that are easy to find. And it's really easy to operate the system. Navigation is available. It doesn't cost a lot to add it to the system. So I can use the maps on my phone if I have signal, but since we're out here, I don't have signal, so the built-in native maps are really nice to have because I wouldn't have maps otherwise.
The navigation system is not quite as detailed as the Gladiators, in particular to showing trail detail when you're going off-road. Having said that, Chevrolet's Link 3 is very responsive and has all the smartphone connectivity that anybody that's into tech would want. The screen's big, colorful, and very responsive. There's a 4G LTE Wi-Fi hotspot connection available with it, and an induction charging pad, although the induction pad is a little too small for any of today's larger phones.
The interesting thing about the audio system here in the Gladiator is it sounds better than the same system in a Wrangler Unlimited, and that's because the cab is smaller. I mean, it's got the same size back seat, but because there's a rear window there and you don't have the storage is outside the cab, not inside the cab, there's a smaller volume, and so the sound just sounds better. It's also quieter background noise because there's less resonance of just the road noise and the other stuff. So the sound just is that much clearer. The audio system can be upgraded with an optional Bluetooth speaker. And the speaker has a dock that is behind the rear seat back that keeps it out of sight, and it keeps it from rattling around, and it keeps it fully charged. So when we stop and I pair it to my phone, I can listen to my tunes in the campground.
The Colorado's back seat is roomy and perfectly suited for 2 full-size adults or 3 kids. The seat backs fold 60-40 and the seat bottoms fold up 60-40, so you've got some flexibility in cargo. Now, behind the seat backs, there's really not much there, only the attachment points for child seats. Of course, you can fold the seat backs down for additional cargo space, but the ZR2's ride height becomes its curse yet again. When the seat backs are down, the cargo floor is really high, so it'll make getting bulky or heavy cargo in and out a real pain in the back.
The back seat of the Gladiator is really nice. It's got the most legroom of anything else in the class except for the Bridgeline, which wouldn't be caught dead out here. It's also great for storage. If you're just 2 people here and you're out somewhere exploring and you want to have a cooler and some other stuff inside the cab with you, the seat bottoms flip up, the seat backs flip down. They give you a platform to put things on. There's a couple of places to store things behind the rear seat backs when they're folded up, and they're lockable. And the lockable feature is really important because this is a convertible. You might be out here with the top off, and you might want to have that stuff that you've got in those storage compartments under the seat or behind the seat locked away where people can't take them.
The seats are comfortable, and they're covered in a leather-like surface that makes long road trips a breeze. Getting in and out is going to be a little bit harder, and you're going to have to do that a lot because the visibility in the Colorado is not that great. How's the visibility out of that Gladiator, Dan?
It's really, really good. I mean, there's a rock at the apex of this corner, and I've been able to keep my eye on it. I'm not worried about it at all. The hood falls away. It's not very long to begin with. The windshield's nice and vertical up close, so no A-pillar problems. And then the fenders drop away. So yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah, that's one area where I'm definitely envious. The ZR2 is remarkable in many ways, but exterior visibility is not one of them. Where the A-pillar meets the dash in particular is a huge blind spot, and that huge hood protrusion looks great, but man, it's not doing me any favors out here on this tight trail.
Yeah, and I remember that the hood's really wide out towards the headlights, so it sticks way out there in the corners. Or, you know, I can't imagine you're seeing half of what I can see.
I'm just thankful for the cutaway bumper letting me crawl over anything that I miss.
Yeah, but your fenders really stick out wide. You rubbing around any of these corners, the rear fender?
Thankfully, no, but I've been playing it pretty safe and taking the high line. Having said that, I have scraped some of the tops of the rocks, but nothing enough to cause any damage, thankfully.
Yeah, that's the thing about the Colorado, and it applies to the ZR2 as well, is the rear shocks are kind of exposed at the bottom. They're lower than the pumpkin of the differential, in fact.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when you're just going straight or doing a lot broader, wider turns, your wheels kind of follow the same track, but out here in this little tight wash, each tire is just going its own place. So, you know, rocks that I miss with the front end, you know, the rear end stuff, they're pegging them.
Yeah, that's the thing. This trail is so tight, you don't really have the option to steer around some things. Ground clearance is your only friend.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the ZR2 just has more things dangling down.
What's the Colorado done well out here?
Well, definitely I like the ZR2's powertrain. It's super accurate and responsive, and the steering too. While the rear end, I've been kind of just letting it go wherever it wants to go. The front end, I can point just with inch precision, and with the very accurate throttle, I can use the exact amount of throttle without upsetting the chassis.
I'm actually in the same boat back here. You know, the steering that goes along with a solid axle may not be the most accurate out on the highway, but here I'm having no problems at all. And, you know, it doesn't kick back violently if I hit a big rock. It's pretty stable and steady in that regard.
Normally, I would think the ZR2 would be better out in the open, but, you know, aside from the ground clearance issues, it's doing really well.
We're here on a trail through the mud hills, and the thing about this trail is every time you come here, you never know what you're gonna get, because every time it rains, it changes. Every time somebody in a RZR throws up a roost of mud, it changes.
It's a perfect place to try out trucks that have a lot of articulation, a lot of ground clearance, and really good drivability, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, you need traction and you need clearance for sure. And we're gonna need a lot of it here pretty soon if we don't get going, because it looks like it's gonna rain right away.
It's been pretty even, although rough terrain, but I heard over the radio that up ahead is something a little bit gnarlier, so I'm gonna go ahead and put it in 4 low just to get it ready. All you gotta do is put in neutral and flip the knob, and literally in that amount of time it's in low. And what that lets me do is not use the brakes so I can maximize traction on this loose surface. It's pretty steep and rocky, but ZR2 doesn't care. All right, now we have a steep climb out of this little gully, and the gear reduction that we get gives us all that extra torque and modulation, so we pop out without any problems. Ta-da!
Hey Calvin, how was that?
It looks a lot worse than it is. You gotta watch.
Watch out at the very bottom. There's a little bit of a divot.
All right, I'll keep an eye out.
I don't think I'm gonna pop it into 4 low. I've got a secret weapon. My stabilizer bars are disconnected. I do that a lot because it makes for a nicer ride. You don't have as much jostling left to right, but that'll also give me a little bit more articulation than he's got. And I know I've got better approach clearance than he does, so I don't think I'm gonna have as much trouble at the bottom, but we'll see. Famous last words, right? Okay, oh, here's what he was talking about. This doesn't look too bad. Just ease through. I'm still in 4 high. Oh, I touched my trailer hitch, which is what they're for, right? I probably took a little bit deeper line than I needed to.
Looks like it wasn't a problem regardless.
Nah, and I was in 4 high the whole time. Well, that was fun.
Yeah, I mean, overall, we learned a lot, right?
Exactly.
What was your biggest surprise?
Well, you know, I came into this really suspicious of the Gladiator's long wheelbase. It's quite a bit longer than the ZR2, but that didn't turn out to be an issue at all.
I got to drive it a little bit too, and I was really impressed with the ride comfort, especially over all that washboard.
Yeah, but the ZR2 was way better on the highway on the way here.
Yeah, and I actually really liked it on the washboard, on the faster stuff. I really liked the pointability, and honestly, its handling surprised me in the tight stuff.
Oh, absolutely, but in the tight stuff, I had a couple of problems with it. Namely, visibility. The hood is really wide. It's hard to find out where the corners are. And then in the back, that spare tire hangs down a lot. And I remember taking a really hard hit when I dropped into a gully. I thought I broke something, but actually it was just the spare grounding out.
Now, the most important question for a lot of people is going to be price.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The Rubicon is typically pretty pricey, and that hasn't stopped Jeep people from buying it. So we'll see, but certainly the ZR2 is a lot cheaper.
It is. I mean, I guess if you want to spend more money, you can get the Bison with its additional protection.
Yeah.
But honestly, the capability between the two is the same.
So yeah, I got some friends here, and I'm coming back in a couple of weeks. I think this is the one I'll bring back because I've got some more canyons to explore, and I've seen how this maneuvers through the tight stuff, and I just like it.
For me, while I love the Wrangler and now the Gladiator, the ZR2, just because it's so much fun to play in the open desert floor. And man, it's almost 3 hours back home. I really like being comfortable on the highway.
Yeah, that's for sure. I can't argue with that. When all was said and done, we compiled everything we learned about the entire Gladiator lineup and compared it to the full range of its competition. Setting aside the Honda Ridgeline, which is more of a pavement specialist, the Gladiator is now our highest ranked four-wheel drive midsize truck. If off-road capability is remotely important to your next truck purchase, the Gladiator is worth a hard look. You know, I really enjoyed this trip, but I'm almost disappointed that we're leaving now just as it's starting to rain here and snow in the higher elevations. You know, it's not just about perfect weather, it's about all the different kinds of weather and all the different kinds of terrain, the wildflowers that come out at certain times of year, the hot weather, the cold weather. I love it all. I'm one of those people, I see a line on the map, I want to know where it goes, I want to be there, I want to see what it's all about. And that's what's really neat about the Gladiator, is it can go off-road exploring in its own right, but if you want to go deeper, you could bring a side-by-side on a trailer and tow it out there with this.
You know, a lot of people will say, hey, how come you're out there when it's raining and miserable? Well, frankly, because it's fun, right? I mean, I draw a lot of parallels to the original American settlers that went out and explored the countryside in horse-drawn carriages. You know, that feeling of going up a rise and seeing the valley floor below for the first time must have been exhilarating. And while I know that sounds a little bit silly, I can kind of experience a little piece of that in this truck. And, you know, the ability to just look out at a mountain, see a trail, and go, I want to do that trail, and then go and do it, that's pretty amazing. And you know what? I haven't found an experience that beats that. If you like videos of adventures like these, click subscribe. And don't forget to go to Edmunds for all your truck buying needs.